Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Bernard Corbyn MP is a British politician who has served as leader of the Labour Party and leader of the opposition since the 12th of September 2015. He has been the Member of Parliament for Islington North since 1983. Ideologically, he identifies himself as a democratic socialist. Prior to entering politics, Corbyn worked as a representative for various trade unions. His political career began when he was elected to Haringey Council in 1974. He later became Secretary of Hornsey Constituency Labour Party, and continued in both roles until he was elected as MP for Islington North. As a backbench MP, he was known for activism and rebelliousness, frequently voting against the Labour whip, including when the party was in government under leaders Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. As Labour leader, Corbyn advocates reversing austerity cuts to public services and welfare funding made since 2010, and proposes renationalisation of public utilities and the railways. A long-standing anti-war and anti-nuclear activist, Corbyn supports a foreign policy of military non-interventionism and unilateral nuclear disarmament. He was the national chair of the Stop the War coalition and a member of the Socialist campaign group until his election as leader of the Labour Party. After Labour's defeat in the 2015 general election and the resignation of Ed Miliband, Corbyn announced his candidacy for the Labour leadership. Although he was regarded as a fringe hopeful in the leadership election, having only just secured 35 nominations from fellow Labour MPs to be placed on the ballot, Corbyn quickly emerged as the leading candidate in opinion polls, and secured the support of the majority of trade unions affiliated to Labour. He was elected Labour Party leader in September 2015, with a first-round vote of 59.5%. After the EU referendum in June 2016, Labour MPs passed a vote of no confidence in Corbyn by 172 votes to 40 following the resignation of around two-thirds of Corbyn's shadow cabinet. In September 2016, following a leadership contest, Corbyn retained leadership of the party with an increased vote share of 61.8%. In the snap 2017 general election, Labour under Corbyn again finished as the second-largest party in Parliament, but increased their share of the popular vote to 40%, resulting in a gain of 32 seats and a hung Parliament. Labour's 9.6% vote swing was its largest since 1945. Early life. Corbyn was born in Chippenham and brought up in nearby Kington St Michael in Wiltshire. He is the youngest of the four sons of Naomi Loveday, a maths teacher, and David Benjamin Corbyn, an electrical engineer and expert in power rectifiers. His brother Piers Corbyn is a weather forecaster. His parents were peace campaigners who met in the 1930s at a committee meeting in support of the Spanish Republic at Conway Hall during the Spanish Civil War. When Corbyn was 7 years old, the family moved to Pade Lane in Shropshire, where his father bought Yew Tree Manor, converting it into a family home. Corbyn was educated at Castle House Preparatory School, an independent school near Newport, Shropshire, before attending Adams's Grammar School as a day student. While still at school, he became active in the Wrexham constituency Young Socialists, his local Labour Party, and the League Against Cruel Sports. He achieved 2 E-grade A-levels before leaving school at 18. Corbyn joined the campaign for nuclear disarmament in 1966 whilst at school, and later became one of its 3 vice-chairs. After school, Corbyn worked briefly as a reporter for a local newspaper, the Newport and Market Drayton Advertiser. At around the age of 19 he spent 2 years doing voluntary service overseas in Jamaica. Early career in political activities. Returning to the UK in 1971, he worked as an official for the National Union of Tailors and Garment Workers. Corbyn began a course in trade union studies at North London Polytechnic, but left after a year without a degree after a series of arguments with his tutors over the curriculum. He worked as a trade union organiser for the National Union of Public Employees and Amalgamated Engineering and Electrical Union, where his union was approached by Tony Benn and encouraged to produce a blueprint for workers' control of British Leyland. The plans did not proceed after Benn was moved to a different department. He was appointed a member of a district health authority, and in early 1974, at the age of 24, he was elected to Haringey Council in South Hornsey ward. After boundary changes in 1978, he was re-elected in Haringey ward as councillor, remaining so until 1983. As a delegate from Hornsey to the Labour Party conference in 1978, Corbyn successfully moved a motion calling for dentists to be employed by the NHS rather than private contractors. He also spoke in another debate, describing a motion calling for greater support for law and order as more appropriate to the National Front than to the Labour Party. Corbyn became the local Labour Party's agent and organiser, and had responsibility for the 1979 general election campaign in Hornsey. Around this time, he became involved with London Labour Briefing, where he was a contributor, a member of the editorial board during the 1980s. It has been reported that he served as its general secretary for some time. He worked on Tony Benn's unsuccessful deputy leadership campaign in 1981. He was keen to allow former International Marxist Group member Tariq Ali to join the party, despite Labour's national executive having declared him unacceptable, and declared that, so far as we are concerned, he's a member of the party and he'll be issued with a card. In May 1982, when Corbyn was chairman of the Constituency Labour Party, Ali was given a party card signed by Corbyn. In November the local party voted by 17 to 14 to insist on his membership, up to and including the point of disbandment of the party. In the July 1982 edition of London Labour Briefing, Jeremy Corbyn opposed expulsions of the militant tendency, saying that, if expulsions are in order for militant, they should apply to us too. In the same year, he was the provisional convener of Defeat the Witch Hunt campaign, based at Corbyn's then address. Labour in opposition. Corbyn was selected as the Labour Party candidate for the constituency of Islington North in February 1982, winning the final ballot by 39 votes against 35 for GLC councillor Paul Boateng. At the 1983 general election, he was elected Member of Parliament for Islington North, after defeating the incumbent Michael O'Halloran, and immediately joined the Socialist campaign group, later becoming secretary of the group. Shortly after being elected to Parliament, he began writing a weekly column for the Morning Star, saying in May 2015 that, "The Star is the most precious and only voice we have in the daily media." Corbyn was a campaigner against apartheid in South Africa, serving on the national executive of the anti-apartheid movement, and was arrested in 1984 while demonstrating outside South Africa House during the BBC's Newsnight in 1984. Conservative MP Terry Dix asserted that so-called Labour scruffs should be banned from addressing the House of Commons unless they maintained higher standards. Corbyn responded, saying that, "It's not a fashion parade, it's not a gentleman's club, it's not a banker's institute. It's a place where the people are represented." Sinn Féin, IRA, and similar links. In 1984, Corbyn and Ken Livingstone were criticised for inviting two convicted Provisional IRA members as well as Gerry Adams and other members of the Irish Republican Party Sinn Féin to Westminster 3 weeks after the Brighton Hotel bombing, an attack carried out by the IRA that killed 5 people. He became known during the 1980s for his work on behalf of the Guildford 4 and Birmingham 6, who were eventually found to have been wrongly convicted of responsibility for a series of bombings carried out in England in the mid-1970s by the IRA that killed 28 people. In the run-up to the 2017 general election, Corbyn said that he had never met the IRA, although Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott later clarified that although he had met members of the IRA, he met with them in the capacity as activists in Sinn Féin. Corbyn was arrested in 1986 for protesting against the trial of a group of IRA members including the Brighton bomber Patrick Magee. Magee was convicted of murdering 5 people, and the group were convicted of planning a massive bombing campaign in London and seaside resorts. After refusing police requests to move from outside the court, Corbyn and the other protesters were arrested for obstruction and held for 5 hours before being released on bail, but were not charged. In the early 1990s, MI5 opened a file on Corbyn over fears his IRA links meant he could have been a threat to national security. The Metropolitan Police's Special Branch was also monitoring Corbyn at the time, and continued to monitor him for 2 decades over fears he was attempting to undermine democracy. According to the Sunday Times, following research in Irish and Republican archives, Corbyn was involved in over 72 events connected with Sinn Féin or other pro-Republican groups during the period of the IRA's paramilitary campaign. Corbyn supported the campaign to overturn the convictions of Jawad Botma and Samar Alami for the 1994 bombing of the Israeli embassy in London. Botma and Alami had admitted possessing explosives and guns, but denied they were for use in Britain. The convictions were upheld by the High Court of Justice in 2001 and by the European Court of Human Rights in 2007. Poll tax protests and select committee membership. In 1990, Corbyn opposed the community charge, or poll tax, nearly going to jail for not paying the tax. Corbyn sat on the Social Security Select Committee from 1992 to 1997, the London Regional Select Committee from 2009 to 2010, and the Justice Select Committee from 2010 to 2015. Anti-war activism. In October 2001, Corbyn was elected to the steering committee of the Stop the War Coalition, which was formed to oppose the Afghanistan war, which started later that year. In 2002, Corbyn reported unrest. There is disquiet about issues of foreign policy among some members of the Labour Party. He cited the deployment of troops to Afghanistan and the threat of bombing Iraq as examples. He was vehemently opposed to the Iraq War in 2003 and spoke at dozens of anti-war rallies in Britain and overseas. He helped organize the February anti-Iraq war protest, which was claimed to be the largest such protest in British political history. In 2006, Corbyn was one of 12 Labour MPs to support Plaid Cymru in the Scottish National Party's call for a parliamentary inquiry into the Iraq War. He was elected chair of the coalition in succession to Andrew Murray in September 2011, but resigned once he became leader of the Labour Party in September 2015. Parliamentary groups and activism. Corbyn is a member of a number of parliamentary trade union groups. He is sponsored by several trade unions, including Unison, Unite and the National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers. He is a supporter of the Unite Against Fascism pressure group. Corbyn was chair of the all-party parliamentary group on the Chagos Islands, chair of the APPG on Mexico, vice chair of the APPG on Latin America, and vice chair of the APPG on human rights. He has advocated for the rights of the forcibly removed Chagosians to return to the British Indian Ocean Territory. Iranian state television demonstration. In June 2014, Corbyn hosted a call-in show on Press TV, an Iranian government television channel, from 2009 to 2012, for which he was paid up to £20,000, according to the Register of Members' Interests at the House of Commons. Corbyn's final appearance was 6 months after the network had its UK broadcasting licence revoked by Ofcom for its part in filming the detention and torture of Mazia Bihari, an Iranian journalist. Ofcom ruled in November 2010 that Corbyn did not show due impartiality when he appeared on Press TV as a guest on George Galloway's weekly show. Labour in opposition. Corbyn was one of 16 signatories to an open letter to Ed Miliband in January 2015 calling for Labour to make a commitment to opposing further austerity, to take rail franchises back into public ownership, and to strengthen collective bargaining arrangements. Before becoming party leader, Corbyn had been returned as Member of Parliament for Islington North 7 times, gaining 60.24% of the votes cast, and a majority of 21,194 in the 2015 general election. Leadership election. Following the Labour Party's defeat at the general election on the 7th of May 2015, Ed Miliband resigned as its party leader, triggering a leadership election on the 2nd of June. It was reported in media sources that Corbyn was considering standing as a candidate, having been disillusioned by the lack of a left-wing voice. The next day, Corbyn confirmed to his local newspaper, the Islington Tribune, that he would stand in the election on a clear anti-austerity platform. He added, "This decision is in response to an overwhelming call by Labour Party members who want to see a broader range of candidates and a thorough debate about the future of the party. I am standing to give Labour Party members a voice in this debate." The other candidates were Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, Shadow Health Secretary Andy Burnham, and Shadow Care Minister Liz Kendall. Corbyn had the lowest number of nominations from fellow MPs of any Labour Party leader, and several who nominated him later claimed to have cleared him to run more to widen the political debate within the party than because of a desire or expectation that he would win. Nonetheless, he rapidly became the frontrunner among the candidates at the second reading of the Welfare Reform and Work Bill in July 2015. Corbyn joined 47 Labour MPs to oppose the bill, describing it as rotten and indefensible, whilst the other 3 leadership candidates abstained. In August 2015, he called on Ian Duncan Smith to resign as Secretary of State for Work and Pensions after it emerged that thousands of disabled people had died after being found fit to work by work capability assessments between 2011 and 2014. Following a rule change under Miliband, members of the public who supported Labour's aims and values could join the party as registered supporters for £3 and be entitled to vote in the election. There was speculation the rule change would lead to Corbyn being elected by registered supporters without majority support from ordinary members. Corbyn was elected party leader in a landslide victory on 12 September 2015, with 59.5% of first preference votes in the first round of voting. It has been calculated that Corbyn would have won in the first round with 51% of votes, even without £3 registered supporters, having gained the support of 49.6% of full members and 57.6% of affiliated supporters. Corbyn's 40.5% majority was a larger proportional majority than that attained by Tony Blair in 1994. His margin of victory was said to be the largest mandate ever won by a party leader, though also the smallest mandate from Labour MPs. Leader of the Opposition. On Saturday, 27 February 2016, after being elected leader on 12 September 2015, Corbyn became leader of the official opposition, and shortly thereafter his appointment to the Privy Council was announced. 2 days later, Corbyn engaged in his first Prime Minister's Questions session as leader and broke with the traditional format by asking the Prime Minister 6 questions he had received from members of the public, the result of his invitation to Labour Party members to send suggestions, for which he received around 40,000 emails. Corbyn stressed his desire to reduce the theatrical nature of the House of Commons, and his acute BUQ was described in a Guardian editorial as a good start and a long overdue change to the tone of PMQs. He delivered his first Labour annual conference address as leader on 29 September 2015. As leader of the opposition, he was made a member of the Privy Council on the 11th of November 2015. In late October 2015, Corbyn appointed The Guardian journalist Seamus Milne as the Labour Party's executive director of strategy and communications. In July 2016, a study and analysis by academics from the London School of Economics of months of 8 national newspaper articles about Corbyn in the first months of his leadership of Labour showed that 75% of them either distorted or failed to represent his actual views on subjects. First, shadow cabinet and other appointments. On 13 September 2015, Corbyn unveiled his shadow cabinet. He appointed his leadership, campaign manager, and long-standing political ally John McDonnell as shadow chancellor, leadership opponent Andy Burnham as shadow Home Secretary, and Angela Eagle as shadow First Secretary of State to deputise for him in the House of Commons. Corbyn promoted a number of female backbench MPs to shadow cabinet roles, including Diane Abbott, Heidi Alexander and Lisa Nandy, making his the first shadow cabinet with more women than men, although the most senior roles went to men. Military intervention in Syria. After members of Islamic State carried out terrorist attacks in Paris in November 2015, Corbyn suggested that the only way to deal with the threat posed by the jihadist group would be to reach a political settlement aimed at resolving the Syrian civil war. Prime Minister David Cameron sought to build political consensus for UK military intervention against his targets in Syria in the days after the attacks. Speaking at a regional party conference in Bristol on 21 November, Corbyn warned against external intervention in Syria. but told delegates that Labour would consider the proposals the government brings forward. Cameron set out his case for military intervention to Parliament in November. Corbyn's shadow cabinet met immediately after the Prime Minister's statement, in which Corbyn said he would continue with efforts to reach a common view on Syria, while Shadow Foreign Secretary Hilary Benn suggested the case for airstrikes was compelling. Later that evening, Corbyn sent a letter to Labour MPs saying that he could not support military action against Islamic State. The issue is whether what the Prime Minister is proposing strengthens or undermines our national security. I do not believe the current proposal for airstrikes in Syria will protect our security, and therefore cannot support it. Amid widespread reports of division in the Parliamentary Labour Party and criticism of his leadership, Corbyn, on the Andrew Marr Show, said he was not going anywhere and was enjoying every minute of his leadership, insisting that the final decision on whether the Labour Party would oppose airstrikes rested with him. On the 30th of November, Corbyn agreed that Labour MPs would be given a free vote on airstrikes. When the issue was voted on 2 days later, a total of 66 Labour MPs voted for the Syrian airstrikes, including Hilary Benn and Deputy Labour leader Tom Watson, while Corbyn and the majority of Labour MPs voted against. January 2016 Shadow Cabinet Reshuffle. Meet with President Obama in April 2016. There was widespread speculation following the vote that Corbyn would reshuffle his shadow cabinet to remove Hilary Benn, but Corbyn's January reshuffle retained Benn in the same position. The reshuffle prompted the resignations of 3 junior shadow ministers who were unhappy that Corbyn had demoted MPs who disagreed with his position on Syria and Trident. On the 6th of January 2016, Corbyn replaced Shadow Culture Secretary Michael Duffer with Shadow Defence Secretary Maria Eagle. Thornbury, unlike Maria Eagle, is an opponent of nuclear weapons and British involvement in Syria. Eagle was in turn moved to Shadow Culture Secretary to replace Michael Duffer. Corbyn also replaced Shadow Europe Minister Pat McFadden with Pat Glass. On the 11th of January 2016, Shadow Attorney General Catherine McKinnell resigned, citing party infighting, family reasons, and the ability to speak in Parliament beyond her legal portfolio. She was replaced by Carl Turner. May 2016 Local elections. A series of elections for local councils and devolved legislatures took place on 5 May 2016. Voting was held for the Scottish Parliament, the National Assembly for Wales, 124 English local councils and 4 elected mayorships, including the Mayor of London. There were also Westminster by-elections in 2 Labour safe seats, which Labour retained, Ogmore and Sheffield, Brightside and Hillsborough. Labour had a net loss of 18 local council seats, and controlled as many councils as before. The BBC's projected national vote share was 31% for Labour, 30% for the Conservatives, 15% for the Liberal Democrats and 12% for UKIP. Labour candidate Sadiq Khan won the London mayorship from the Conservatives. Labour's misfortunes in Scotland continued, where they fell into 3rd place behind the Conservatives. They retained government in Wales despite some small losses. Under Corbyn, Labour had won 47% of the council seats that were available. EU referendum following the June 2016 vote to leave the EU. Corbyn was accused of lukewarm campaigning for Britain to stay in the European Union, and showing a lack of leadership on the issue by several party figures. Alan Johnson, who headed up the Labour in for Britain campaign, said, "At times it felt as if Corbyn's office was working against the rest of the party and had conflicting objectives." Corbyn's decision to go on holiday during the campaign was criticised. In September 2016, Corbyn's spokesman said Corbyn wanted access to the European single market, but there were aspects of EU membership related to privatisation, which Jeremy campaigned against in the referendum campaign. Shadow cabinet resignations and vote of no confidence 3 days after the EU referendum. Hilary Benn was sacked after it was disclosed that he had been organising a mass resignation of shadow cabinet members to force Corbyn to stand down. Several other cabinet members resigned in solidarity with Benn, and by mid-afternoon on the 27th of June 2016, 23 of the 31 shadow cabinet members had resigned their roles, as did 7 parliamentary private secretaries. Earlier, Corbyn announced changes to his shadow cabinet, moving Emily Thornberry, Diane Abbott, and appointing Pat Glass, Andy MacDonald, Clive Lewis, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Kate Osar-Moore, Rachel Maskell, Cat Smith and Dave Anderson to his shadow cabinet. However, just 2 days later, one of the newly appointed members, Pat Glass, resigned, saying, "The situation is untenable." A motion of no confidence in Corbyn as Labour leader was tabled by MPs Margaret Hodge and Anne Coffey on the 24th of June 2016. Hodge said, "This has been a tumultuous referendum which has been a test of leadership. Jeremy has failed that test." Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell and union leaders including Len McCluskey condemned the motion. On the 28th of June, he lost the vote of confidence by Labour Party MPs by 172 to 40. He responded with a statement that the motion had no constitutional legitimacy and that he intended to continue as the elected leader. The vote did not require the party to call a leadership election, but was expected to lead to a leadership challenge. By the 29th of June, Corbyn had been encouraged to resign by GMB, UCATT, the CWU, the TSSA, ASLEF, the FBU, the BFWAU, and the NUM issued a joint statement saying that Corbyn was the democratically elected leader of Labour, and his position should not be challenged except through the proper democratic procedures provided for in the party's constitution, and that a leadership election would be an unnecessary distraction. Diane Abbott, Shadow Health Secretary, said that cabinet resignations and secret ballot had no status under the party rulebook. MPs don't choose the leader of the Labour Party, the party does. A YouGov poll of Labour Party members found that about 50% expected to back Corbyn if a leadership ballot was called. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who did not take a side in the dispute, said, "When Labour splits, when we're divided, we lose elections." 2016 leadership challenge and election. The division between Corbyn and the Labour Parliamentary Party continued. On the 11th of July 2016, Angela Eagle, who had recently resigned from his shadow cabinet, formally launched her leadership campaign after news reports that Eagle's office had been vandalized, and threats and abuse to other MPs, including death threats to himself. Corbyn said, "It is extremely concerning that Angela Eagle has been the victim of a threatening act, and called for respect and dignity, even where there is disagreement." On the 12th of July 2016, following a dispute as to whether the elected leader would need nominations in an election as a challenger to their own leadership, Labour's National Executive Committee resolved that Corbyn, as the incumbent leader, had an automatic right to be on the ballot, and also decided that members needed to have signed up on or before the 12th of January 2016 to be eligible. to vote, meaning that many members who had joined recently would not be able to vote. The NEC did however decide that registered supporters would be entitled to vote if they paid a one-off fee of £25. 184,541 people subsequently paid the one-off fee to become registered supporters of the party during the two-day window in July, meaning that over 700,000 people had a vote in the leadership election. The decision to retain Corbyn on the ballot was contested unsuccessfully in a High Court action brought by Labour donor Michael Foster. On the 13th of July, Owen Smith entered the Labour Party leadership race. Subsequently, on the 19th of July, Angela Eagle withdrew and offered her endorsement to Smith. The results of an Ipsos Mori survey, polling the British public as a whole, released on the 14th of July indicated that 66% of those surveyed believed that the Labour Party needed a new leader before the 2020 elections. As well, only 23% believed that Corbyn would make a good Prime Minister, while Theresa May had an approval rating of 55%. A Opinion Observer poll on the 23rd of July found that among those who said they backed Labour, 54% supported Corbyn against just 22% who would prefer Smith. Some 20% said they are undecided, and 4% said they do not intend to vote. When voters were asked who they thought would be the best Prime Minister, Corbyn or Theresa May, among Labour supporters 48% said Corbyn and 22% May. Among all UK voters 52% chose May and just 16% were for Corbyn. More than 40 female Labour MPs, in an open letter during the campaign in July 2016, called on Corbyn to deal with issues relating to online abuse, and criticised him for his allegedly unsatisfactory responses and inaction. Speaking at the launch of policies intending to democratise the Internet in late August, Corbyn described such abuse as appalling. He continued, "I have set up a code of conduct on this. The Labour Party has a code of conduct on this, and it does have to be dealt with." On the 16th of August 2016, Corbyn released a video of himself sitting on the floor of a Virgin Trains East Coast train while travelling to a leadership hustings in Gateshead. Corbyn said the train was ram-packed, and used this to support his policy to reverse the 1990s privatisation of the railways of Great Britain. A dispute, nicknamed Traingate in the media, developed a week later when Virgin released CCTV images appearing to show that Corbyn had walked past some available seats on the train before recording his video. Corbyn subsequently said that there had not been room for all his team to sit together until later on in the journey, when other passengers were upgraded by train staff. The psephologist John Curtis wrote just before Corbyn's second leadership win, "There is evidently a section of the British public to be found, particularly among younger voters, for whom the Labour leader does have an appeal. It just does not look like a section that is big enough, on its own at least, to enable Labour to win a general election." Meanwhile, a poll for The Independent by BMG Research suggested that working-class voters were more likely to consider Corbyn incompetent than those from the middle class, and a higher proportion thought he was out of touch. Also, Martin Kettle of The Guardian wrote that many Labour MPs, even some who faced defeat, want an early election to prove decisively that Corbyn's Labour is unelectable as a government. If there is hope for Labour, it lies with the voters. Only they can change the party. At the 2016 Labour Party conference following re-election, Corbyn was re-elected as Labour leader. on the 24th of September, with 313,209 votes compared to 193,229 for Owen Smith, a slightly increased share of the vote compared to his election in 2015, when he won 59%. On a turnout of 77.6%, Corbyn won the support of 59% of party members, 70% of registered supporters and 60% of affiliated supporters. In his acceptance speech, Corbyn called on the Labour family to end their divisions and to wipe that slate clean from today and get on with the work we've got to do as a party. He continued, together, arguing for the real change this country needs. I have no doubt this party can win the next election whenever the Prime Minister decides to call it, and form the next government. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.